Things didn't go at all like I expected they would after I received my autism diagnosis. I didn't expect the insane roller coaster ride that would take me the better part of a year to come off of. It would be a year of turmoil, grief, rage, hopelessness, and a never-ending list of failures. It would turn out to be the toughest year of my life, a year of immense pain, but one that I wouldn't change for anything, because through it all, I would learn how to rediscover who I was, accept my neurodivergent self, and become the person I was born to be. I hope this story helps you on your journey. This story begins before I was officially diagnosed. Like many people, over the course of many years, I started to realize that I didn't fit in. Things were really hard for me that seemed so easy for everybody else. Like going out to eat with a small group of friends, running basic errands like going to the bank and chatting with the bank teller, even going to the grocery store. I'd watch other people just fly through it and I'd ask, but doesn't that stuff bother you? And what was clear to me was that my physical responses to these experiences were unique and not what I thought was normal. I never felt comfortable, never felt really safe. People were the biggest issue for me. I was getting into trouble because of how I was wording things, or my facial expressions looked really stern. I felt like constant punches were being thrown at me, and I couldn't figure out why. Why was no one else getting hit with these things? I had a bunch of sleep issues, health ailments like stomach problems, skin infections. I was always itching regardless of how much I cleaned and how much lotion I put on. So all of this stuff led to an autism diagnosis because I was starting to unravel and this stuff didn't go unnoticed by my wife, Debbie. It was getting harder and harder to hide my discomfort. And I started sharing more stuff with Debbie about what was going on with my brain and body. She connected the dots and eventually I got my autism diagnosis. I resisted the diagnosis at first because of my outdated perceptions of autism. That tune changed as I started to read more about it. And I thought, you know what? Now that I have this understanding, I finally realized that I'm not this weirdo. And I felt overwhelmed with a massive sense of relief. The explanation was that I have a different neurotype. And I remember at that moment, I honestly thought that I'd finally figured it all out and everything suddenly made sense. It was as if I had spent most of my life being a member of a large symphony orchestra where every instrument was grossly out of tune. And then one day, the intonation was suddenly fixed. All of the instruments were perfectly in tune, playing in sync, and producing the most beautiful music I'd ever heard. For a brief moment, I thought everything was just going to instantly get better and all of my pain would disappear. Nothing could have been further from the truth, and I was about to begin the most challenging period of my life. Sometimes I think about that moment, right before the storm, and my stomach immediately clenches because I feel so sad. You know, I wish that I could go back in time and revisit myself in that moment and just give myself a long, well-deserved hug. For me, one of the earliest things that began to happen was that I started to look back at all of these past incidences that caused a fair amount of harm to me. And I got really upset and angry. Really upset with my parents, friends, past girlfriends, and brutally upset with my teachers, all the way from elementary through high school. I kept thinking, if these people who were supposed to care about me and help me, had done a better job, my life wouldn't have been so unnecessarily difficult. I felt like I couldn't shake the anger. It kept replaying in my mind like a broken record, playing the worst songs of all time. My brain started to replay some pretty traumatic experiences I had as a child and adolescent. I started thinking about my past relationships I had and feeling just that I wasn't treated fairly. I was made out to be some kind of weirdo, but I wasn't. I was lied to. I was made fun of. I wasn't allowed to be myself. So it was just a lot of anger and it kept replaying. Those images would come out at night and would carry over into my dreams. I couldn't get rid of them. So it was becoming a problem. It was making me highly irritable. I was zoning out a lot, but these weren't pleasurable experiences at all. Thinking about them made me feel sick. I started to feel more anxious, and that led to even more anger. I remember feeling that everything was just loud and unnecessary noise. Everything bothered me. Everything. All of the time. Not surprisingly, I got tired of it and started telling myself,
you can't keep doing this.
I had to stop the constant anger and rid my brain of these memories that were destroying me from the inside out. So I started creating new images in my brain, spaces that I wanted to create in my future home. Sometimes it would be a tree house. I would have these go-to images and boom, stick those in my brain and really focus on the things I knew I wanted there. Sometimes it would expand a bit to ideas that I could do or things that I wanted to try. I would focus hard to keep these good images in my brain long enough where the bad stuff would fizzle away. And once I'd redirect my thinking, the bad stuff would eventually simmer away. Sometimes it would try to creep back in there, but I kept vigilant. Honestly, sometimes it still happens, but it's not nearly as pervasive as it used to be. The next thing was relearning who I was, and I guess am. And so that phase started. I decided to focus on understanding more about my brain and documenting specific triggers. I started to pay more attention to what I physically needed to do, like stimming or spending time alone. You discover certain things and figure out how to put it into your life. So this process started happening. It led to a lot of realizations. And with the help of my wife, Debbie, I learned that I probably have synesthesia, PDA, misophonia, and alexithymia. I have all of this stuff happening that I never knew about, and this new identity started to take shape. I think once that identity started to come and I realized, this is who I actually am, I got hit with another bout of, oh man, the tempo, the rhythm of my life, it's not sustainable. And if I were to continue with my current lifestyle, my health would rapidly deteriorate. The issues would continue to become chronic and eventually become life-threatening. The cycles of burnout would become more frequent, and if the ailments didn't kill me, then I probably would. This stage for me was kind of like what I'd imagine a pro athlete who's great at their game, but one day they wake up and realize their body can't do it. They aren't as fast as they were. They can't do what they used to do. And it means your life is completely different. And it's really, really frustrating and sad. And there's a part of me that just wants to say, no, this can't be right. I can keep going. I can do it. This can't be me. And these thoughts sort of consume you a lot. It's like going through this process. First, you're thinking, no way. Then it becomes, well, hold on. Maybe this is just temporary. I'll just rest and recover, and then I can do it again. And when you realize that's not going to happen, you feel really sad and down a lot. At that stage, it's challenging to get out of bed. Being autistic, a lot of the time you don't have much energy anyways, but this felt really extreme. It was hard to do anything. Not quite the same as autistic burnout, but just, During that point, I felt angry again. I hated my brain. I didn't want to be autistic anymore. I wanted things to go back to how they used to be years before I got diagnosed. It got to the point where every time I would stim or rub my hands through my hair, I'd feel sick. I remember thinking to myself, what's the point? Is this how I want to live my life? Is it even worth it? I felt completely hopeless. I got really, really down. You just get overwhelmed with sadness because you've lost something that you thought was real, something that you thought would be with you forever. And that loss rips you apart. And I had to work through that. And then gradually you move on, and I started doing things again. I made the adjustments I needed to, slowed things down a little bit, hung out with the people I wanted to, paid closer attention to my body without so many judgments from myself. I became more patient and a little less angry at myself. And I think during these points, I needed help. I really did. In my case, it was mostly from Debbie. I remember her giving me reminders of,
hey, it's okay. This is temporary. Can I help you with this? So how about trying this?
you start to slowly accept who you are. And for the most part, I've accepted it, but it's still an immense learning process for sure. The negative feelings, they sometimes pop back in. The anger, it sometimes comes back, but not for as long. And I just keep moving. I also went through a period when I was very self-conscious about this change. It was really hard to say no, hard to lose people who I would usually spend a lot of time with. For me, walking away from a professional setting you helped to build, it's a lonely feeling. And you feel like you're letting people down. You're caught in this limbo of, if I continue on, I'll hurt myself and jeopardize my marriage and things that are really important to me. But if I make these changes, a lot of the projects, the teams, things that I was a part of, they're gone. I can feel it now when I'm in there sometimes, and there's not this whole walking in the trenches feeling as much, where people see your heart being poured into it and they get inspired and they respect you. I felt older and a lot more useless. Those are tough feelings to work through. And I'll always love that group and what we were doing, but I can't do it the same way I could before. There were times when I felt like it's been so long that I've had to deal with this masking stuff and the difficulties of being an undiagnosed autistic that now it's everybody else's turn. I went through some of that. My brain just went, gee, I have to change my life. I have to accept this new identity. So everyone else needs to do a 180 and change how they talk to me, how they deal with my preferred method of conversation. It was a completely unrealistic set of expectations, and I kind of cast my frustrations outward because honestly, everything was just so damn hard. Coming to grasps with what I couldn't do anymore, having to make so many adjustments, having to relearn so much, rather than look in the mirror and take responsibility, I began to blame everyone around me, and that wasn't sustainable or fair. When I look back, I realized it was my own tempo I was setting for myself. I couldn't maintain it, but I wanted to so badly. I had this plan in my brain and I could see where I wanted to be in the future, but I couldn't do it the same way as I had before. I liked the tempo and I was proud of what I was doing, but then realizing it wasn't healthy for me. My body couldn't keep up with it. I couldn't do that tempo. I wasn't able to mask all the time and always be able to bounce back with the tempo of talk and everything happening all the time with meetings and conversations and being prepared with all of that stuff. And if you're actively learning or have someone else who is actively learning and sharing information with you, you start to realize some of the benefits and positives that come with a different neurotype. I gradually accepted it, and now I realize that I can do a lot of things. I just need to be true to myself. You have to relearn who you are, the person you were before you were smashed into and molded into the person who you thought you were. That was just hanging on and surviving a predominantly neurotypical world, living up to neurotypical behaviors and expectations. As an autistic person, there are a lot of those that I can still live up to. And there's times when I can do it and mask and navigate that world. But for me, I learned to relook at who I was completely. And I still don't know. Some people go through their whole lives and don't fully understand who they are. But a silver lining is that the diagnosis forced me to say, you're stuck with yourself. You're either going to end up killing yourself or you're going to figure it out. So for me, to learn who I am, but also to be open to learning who I am. Instead of focusing on everyone else at the poker table or complaining about the rules of the game, I am focusing on my hand. My goal has become, what's the best way I can play this game? And that's actually a very complicated process because you have to learn. What do I like? What can I do? What can't I do? And those things just need to go out the window because why dwell on what you can't do? Especially if you've already tried, and focus on what I enjoy and what I can do, what I can bring to the world. And gradually, a new life happens. At this stage, I devote a chunk of my life to learning continuously what it means to be autistic. I mean, you usually get diagnosed as an adult because something happened and your life isn't working anymore. And then, whoo, there it is, you're autistic. It's jarring, and there are many stages to relearning and acceptance. And I'm here to say it's possible. For me, there was a big shift, and it just kind of happened naturally. Debbie and I have always been involved in education. It's extremely important to us, and it's a big part of who we are. I realized that I couldn't teach or manage a large staff, and that was a tough pill to swallow. But I was able to come together with a lot of my interests, so I didn't have to fully abandon my professional skill set. I reshifted towards doing education connected with something that I needed to consistently learn about. And in my mind, for me, it was like, hey, if I'm gonna be autistic, I need to love and get consumed with autism. That'll help me with my learning process. It'll help me with my health. And then I can use my love for education and deep dive into learning about autism and also share my experiences and educate others. It's a journey. And to be successful on the journey, you have to keep learning. And you have to be patient. You have to compromise. And ask anyone autistic, we're not the most flexible. So compromise like this isn't easy. I think part of this journey is that you have to be committed to figuring it out. I still struggle with a ton of stuff, like cognitive thinking distortions. I started catching myself doing black and white thinking, reading other people's minds. I catch myself thinking, oh my gosh, this is the absolute worst possible outcome. Or it's either perfect or it's the worst possible thing ever. And when I notice it, I realize how hard it is to change it. It can be really, really frustrating because this is who I am. But I know I can keep working at it and keep picking at it and figure it out a little bit at a time. And that's what you have to do. It's the only thing you really can do. Keep moving forward a little bit at a time.